Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Library, where you can read more about the greatest stories in all of the multiverse. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
And I am Jesse.
We are doing this show in conjunction with Second Union. For more of the latest headlines and entertainment, please go to our website at wearesecondunion.com. Another week, another set of adventures, and mine were pretty much all in overtime. All of my spare time went into working overtime at my day job.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, it's probably the most mundane week I've had in quite a while, which is really saying something. How about you two? How are you doing?
Luckily, no overtime as far as stress, but it'd be great to have some overtime as far as finances. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know the feeling. Jesse, you?
No, just another boring week at the gas station.
Okay. I'm actually trying to solve a financial riddle for the time being.
Oh?
Yeah, Jesse and I have a mutual friend who's going to be going to WonderCon with me. Actually, two of them. And at least one of them has expressed an extreme interest in going to Disneyland because he's a huge Star Wars fan and Galaxy's Edge is fully open now.
Ooh.
So he wants to do that. And I'm fully on board with that. That sounds like a fun thing to do, especially since I haven't done it myself at all, even though it's been open 7 months. The kind of question I'm running into, though, is how exactly I want to go about this, because between that and Avengers Campus opening in California Adventure sometime this summer, it's not a matter of if I will go. It's a matter of how many times and what is the most affordable way to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Because if our mutual friends want to go, it's likely we'll go at least 2 days. And right now, as a resident of Southern California, they have this deal running where for $160 some odd, I get a 3-day, 1 park per day ticket with no blackout dates. It's good till mid-May. Which would cover that trip. Except, like I said, Avengers Campus sounds like it's going to open sometime this summer, which would be after that. So it's turning into a question as to whether or not I want to buy this weird flex pass that's good throughout the year, minus like the holiday weeks, or just buy the tickets I need for individual days. The cost is roughly the same, give or take about $50. You can see the conundrum I'm sitting in.
Yeah.
It's definitely a conundrum, for sure.
Because it's a matter of, do I buy myself something that'll allow me to go as often as I want, with the exception of, like, the week of Christmas and New Year's, or do I just buy the select days? And there's a reason to do the anytime you want thing, because it's like if somebody takes a random trip, hey, I can follow along, and it sounds like a fun day. But then again, there's also the incentive to buy the individual days, just to keep myself from going too often and spending stupid amounts of money.
Right, so is it a season pass that you can go as many times as you want, or is it just like 3 tickets, you get 3 different days any day?
It is a flex pass, and I would have to call ahead of time, like up to 30 days ahead, with some kind of reservationary request. So it's not entirely unlimited, but the likelihood of being turned down on most given days is almost zero, really. So, I still have a little while to figure this out. It's just a question I keep asking myself over and over as I approach the first conceivable days I would use this, and just try and figure it out on my own.
Alright.
You know, but if anybody has any suggestions later, I'm willing to listen, because this has just been eating at me. Other than that, it's been pretty basic, you know. Life goes on. I'm trying to afford my car repairs, which is another reason why overtime kind of rules at this particular moment. But other than that, other than that, I'm looking forward to the end of a couple storylines coming up by the end of this month. Speaking of which, the subject of this week is Female Furies by DC Comics, the 6-issue limited series that came out in 2019. We will get to that after the news of the week. And we always start with Marvel comic news. This is where we talk about the Marvel properties and what storylines they have coming now and in the near future. There's a little bit more information about Marvel's Outlawed. And this one has to do with a Miss Marvel tied into the event. Specifically, Magnificent Miss Marvel number 14. It's going to be written by Saladin Ahmed with art by Minkyu Young. Let me see. It's scheduled to go on sale March 18th. And it actually sheds a little bit of light as to how Kamala Khan's name ended up on this law. Because as we know, Outlawed is the event that's going to make all superheroes under the age of 21 technically illegal. They would have to be formally trained by someone to continue working, or be considered an illegal entity. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we know that the law is named Kamala's Law, and we all imagined it was a Civil War type thing. She stood up on a podium, said her name, unmasked for some reason. Although, all the teasers we've seen seems to say that she was against this law. So maybe she had recrimination, similar to Peter Parker's adventure in the Civil War.
Right.
Except the solicitations for Miss Marvel number 14, again, for March 18th, indicates that Kamala was not willing to put her name on this.
Oh.
Listen to the solicitation. I think you'll understand the rub. Quote, as Miss Marvel recovers from a traumatic ordeal, she finds herself an unwilling martyr for a movement she hates. If she wants to reclaim her narrative, she'll have to wake up first. Unquote. You guys hear what it sounds like happened there, right?
It sounds like she got knocked out.
It sounds like she took an injury. And then her name was put on this law. It doesn't sound like she was a proponent of this law, but it sounds like it's something like Megan's Law. Something horrible happened to her in her civilian clothes, and then somebody named the law after her in her honor.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
There's also images of the proposed cover that show a smiling Kamala Khan, and it looks like somebody took a picture randomly at school. So, yeah, it looks like somebody used her name and face without permission to promote this legislation.
Creepy.
The question is, how far will she go against it? If she's actually against it, will she just fight it, or will she actually have to take off her mask and yell about how much she does not like this law? Given how her family reacts to any sort of superheroic activity, I'm guessing it's the former. I don't think she's going to unmask to fight this. If you guys have any opinions, I am willing to listen, but this is all supposition.
I mean, I agree with you. I didn't have anything else to add.
No, okay. I'm always willing to listen to other people, because goodness knows, we've talked often enough about comic books. I've been proven wrong as much as I've been proven right.
I always forget that you can't see me nodding in agreement here.
Yeah. I always appreciate when you guys nod in audio. It tells me nothing.
Nod, 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 nod.
Well, we also discussed the Snapshots one-shots. These are the follow-ups to the Marvel miniseries that was put out a long time ago. These are one-shots that are celebrating seminal moments in comic or Marvel history, usually seen through the eyes of a bystander, some human who is witnessing legendary events. We already knew about one involving the Submariner, Prince Namor. We knew about another that was involving the Human Torch. Now you can add both Captain America and Cyclops to this list. The Captain America story will revisit the Mad Bomb storyline from Jack Kirby's 1970s run.
Wow.
It's going to be seen through the eyes of how it impacted one South Bronx teenager. The Cyclops story will be about a teenage Scott Summers growing up in an orphanage and witnessing the birth of various Marvel superheroes, while he's trying to figure out his own place in the world. So Scott Summers is actually the, air quotes, normal person up until things happen to him. That's going to be a freaky story.
Yeah.
Like, he's normal? What?
Well, there was a time where he wasn't blasting ceilings with his eyes. According to the solicitation, the Captain America Marvel Snapshot is being written by Mark Russell and Kurt Busiek. The art will be by Ramon Perez. The Cyclops Snapshot will be written by Jay Eden and Kurt Busiek. The art will be by Tom Riley. And, yeah, Scott Summers in particular, everything will be from his point of view in a Nebraska orphanage, and he will experience the debuts of the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, Iron Man, and more heroes, and what it looked like to him. I'm almost curious to know what that would appear to be to him. I didn't think he'd witness that many formational moments in Marvel. And, wow, speaking of formational, we know that the Empire event is going to affect the Fantastic Four and the Avengers rather profoundly. They're going to be extremely busy. Well, the Empire event keeps the Fantastic Four so busy that Sue and Reed Richards' children, Franklin and Valeria, they get involved in some stuff and they need to call in backup. All four members of the Fantastic Four are unavailable, so they need to form another Fantastic Four, a new one, if you will. And they decide to call in two people who are very different, but both have been Fantastic Four members before.
I've seen this cover.
Yeah. Joanna, you want to take any stabs at who's on this team with them? And it's only two of them.
You said one of the Fantastic Four, but the original.
Well,
One of
it's
the originals.
it's Sue and Reed Richards' kids is two of them. The other two have been Fantastic Four members.
I'm not a Fantastic Four fan, so I have no idea.
Okay, well, it's Peter Parker as Spider-Man, and James Howlett as Wolverine.
What?
Yeah, not
Yes.
only are they helping the kids out, you got to remember both of these two were members of the new Fantastic Four during the storyline with Art Adams. But you know what? I'm going to blame the kids for this because during the new Fantastic Four storyline, it was the Danny Ketch Ghost Rider, the Joe Fixit Hulk, Spider-Man, and Wolverine all just kind of happened to be in the same place, and they couldn't find the Fantastic Four at the time. They were just kind of four out of necessity. In this case, both Spider-Man and Wolverine now have Fantastic Four-esque versions of their own costumes, and there's something absolutely hilarious about it.
What?
Yeah, I sent you guys the image. I mean, the Spider-Man one doesn't look too much like a departure from his usual costumes. The Wolverine, though, one, with him in black and blue, there's something really funny about this.
Yeah,
Look-
it doesn't
if-
look right.
It feels like a mix between his X Factor outfit and one of his, I guess, casual blue outfit.
I think it's patterned on his brown outfit. It reminds me of that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Oh,
The only thing is, though, to see Wolverine in this outfit, this one that usually means you're either at the top of science or you're just a world-class adventurer, instead there he is, growling with his claws out. It's like the message is completely blurred.
Well, he can be classified as a world-class adventurer. He's been all around the world.
He's a world-class murderer. Come on.
And Spider-Man looks weird without the
Webs.
Webbing?
Yeah.
The webbing, yeah.
Yeah. I just
And
noticed,
red?
though, that the kids apparently added his classic underarm webbing in this outfit. And why is his
Nice.
webbing glowing pink?
Lighting trick?
I think it's something more profound than that. Something tells me Valeria decided to add some I don't want to say upgrades, but some variances to his usual arsenal.
It probably had a little bit of flair to it.
Yeah, that's a very Valeria thing to do.
It's just funny that these two are the most crossed over characters ever.
You know what? It just occurred to me. I know why Wolverine's making that face on this image.
Because he hates his own outfit?
No, because okay, you're asking Logan to watch kids, and now you're asking Logan to watch two kids with an adult kid.
That's why he's so cranky.
Yeah, this will not go well.
What? Someone's asking him to be the parent?
Look, I just pray they're not up against the Mole Man. That guy deserves better than that. You know, he will run screaming if that happens.
Actually, this is all part of the Empire event. Maybe they're asking them in there because they need chauffeurs to do what they're doing.
I seriously doubted. Something tells me the kids were left behind and this was just what they could get. If they're dealing with a mad thinker again, he deserves more than that. That will be a hospital visit guaranteed.
I'm just trying to think, why does he still keep getting the babysitting duty? Like, how?
I'm pretty sure Parker got babysitting duty. Somehow I'm sure Wolverine was asked to be the heavy.
Wow.
Hey,
Poor guy.
you know, it's all theories. I'm sure we'll find out when this one-shot comes with the rest of the Empire event in March. There is another character who's apparently getting her own series. Because of the upcoming movie this May, the Black Widow is getting a new series. They're calling it Black Widow, Widow's Sting. It will be a prequel going on sale this April that has Natasha Romanoff working with S.H.I.E.L.D. to infiltrate a criminal underworld. In this case, she's going up against a longtime Spider-Man villain known as Silvermane, an underworld figure. Let me see. The art is done by Emma Lupacchino. I can't find who the writer is in this. Oh, there we go. The writer is Ralph Macchio. It's very timely, I gotta admit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Natasha Romanoff's history is always one of those things that I think purposefully has a lot of gaps in it, simply because of her espionage history. I don't think we're meant to know everything until someone is ready to fill in that blank. Oh, wow. Actually, in addition to the prequel series, the Black Widow is getting her own regular series, too. This one is being written by Kelly Thompson with art by Elena Casagrande. The series will follow the Black Widow as she investigates a new mystery in San Francisco. It'll be another solo series. It doesn't seem to have any direct connection to the prior solo series in 2019. According to Thompson, quote, "I think Black Widow is an incredibly rich character in that she worked well in a lot of different genres. But that can also make her a little tricky. If you try to do too much with her instead of committing to a clear vision, I think you run into trouble. I'm very interested in the duality of Natasha, so look for that to be a recurring theme in this first arc as she struggles against that and leans into it," unquote. That's not a bad concept. And I gotta agree, the Black Widow is tricky because she fits into so many genres. Sometimes her storylines shift so radically, even within like the Avengers books, you can never track where she's coming from.
Mm.
And that is not the end of the Black Widow related stories. 2 of the Black Widow's associates are getting their own, I believe, limited series. Oh, no, it's an ongoing series coming out this April. It's called Widowmakers, Red Guardian and Yelena Belova. Devin Grayson, the co-creator of Yelena Belova, is coming back to help write this with J.G. Jones. And the 2 of them are going to team up to face threats from their past. The cover's done by Mike McCone, the art is by Michelle Bandini. The solicitation reads, quote, "Devin Grayson, one of the creators of Yelena Belova, the Red Room recruit who once nearly killed Natasha Romanoff, returns with a brand new story drawn by rising star Michelle Bandini. Yelena has spent years trying to figure out who she is. Once she thought the Black Widow mantle was her destiny, but fate had other plans. Now the past is catching up with her, and with Alexei Shostakov, a.k.a. the Red Guardian. Alexei has worn many titles, including husband to Natasha, but while the Widow played her avenging games, the Red Guardian waited in the shadows. Now a new day is dawning, and this time, no one will stand in their way," unquote. I know those names may not make a lot of sense to casual comic readers. There was a short period in the 90s where Yelena Belova did replace Natasha Romanoff as the Black Widow in comics. It did not last terribly long. The fan pushback was hard. If you're looking for a comparison, think Artemis replacing Diana's Wonder Woman hard.
Yeah, that was difficult.
Yeah. I'm not sure anyone ever gave the character a chance, but I fully admit that during that period I was not reading the Avengers at all. I wasn't interested in their story. So I don't know how deep this goes. The Red Guardian is the Soviet-era version of Captain America for Russia. He's a super soldier, carries a shield, although I don't know if it's made up of anything special. Even his costume at different points looks like just a red and black variation on Captain America's outfit. And the Red Guardian, it always seems like they try to make him a bigger bigger character in Marvel, but it just kind of falls flat. And to be fair, though, is that Steve Rogers has way more history than this guy.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's his fault. It just doesn't work out that way. And there is one more series about a Black Widow-related character, and I say related because this has to do with a film coming in May. The Taskmaster is getting his own series.
Huh.
The classic villain who can replicate any fighting move he sees in person, or even on TV. According to the solicitation, he's wanted for a murder, but for once it's a murder he did not commit. For once. I can't believe I said that out loud.
I was just saying, wait.
It's being written by Jed McKay with art by Alessandro Vitti. The solicitation reads, quote, "Taskmaster has murdered Maria Hill." Or,
What?
at least that's what the whole world thinks. Now the greatest spies in the business are hunting him down and won't stop until Taskmaster is dead or clears his own name. Follow Jed McKay and Alessandro Vitti on a globe-spanning adventure that will send ripples through every corner of the Marvel Universe's espionage community, unquote. Okay, now, Maria Hill has not been in use in comics for quite a while, since S.H.I.E.L.D. was pretty much destroyed. She was ousted as the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. after the Pleasant Hill problem.
Yeah.
How much do you guys know about Pleasant Hill?
Footnotes.
Okay, so Pleasant Hill was a good concept that Maria Hill never asked permission for. More or less what she was doing was using fragments of cosmic cubes from various Marvel adventures that S.H.I.E.L.D. had collected. And instead of asking permission, she was using those cubes to rewrite the personalities of villains that S.H.I.E.L.D. had captured and turn them into regular citizens in this false city called Pleasant Hill that was just somewhere in random, like, Midwest America.
Mm-hmm.
It was her way of incarcerating prisoners, although it wasn't with any sense of due process or permission. She never asked any governmental body to do this. She never actually ran these people through any sort of court processes. It's just if they captured somebody high profile enough, she somehow spirited them away from S.H.I.E.L.D. and created this penal colony.
That seems questionable.
It was. Unfortunately, because of the abilities and or technical knowledge of certain villains, including the Tinkerer, who was also a former Thunderbolt. I think his name was... No, it wasn't Gizmo. It was something very similar to that, though. Gosh, I really don't remember at this point. But basically, because he always had this random inclination to just kind of tinker with the things in town, he eventually accidentally built a device that was interfering with the powers of the cube shards, and then got himself out of it, and then slowly, one by one, started to find different people through this town that were other supervillains, and they eventually rioted. And it wasn't like Hill knew that she wasn't doing anything wrong. She wanted to put enough people in this thing that, you know, America and the world were safer places, and the last house to be occupied in Pleasant Hill was supposed to be by her. She expected to be put in this thing herself because of the sin of creating it, more or less.
So she was fully aware of what she was doing here.
Yeah, she was fully aware that what she was doing was wrong. I guess she just hoped to reach a tipping point where people decided it would be too risky to try to undo it before she put herself in it. However, yeah, it looks like at this point she's going to die, and everyone believes the Taskmaster is the one that did it. According to the cover, there's several other figures here that may be hunting down the Taskmaster, including Phil Coulson, Daisy Johnson, Quake, and General Okoye from Wakanda.
Oh, cool.
Coulson's alive?
Yeah, he's been resurrected for a while. He originally died during the Secret Empire event.
Yeah, I remember Deadpool killed him.
Yeah, I don't know the details as to how he's back, but right now he's running the U.S. government anti-Avengers program. He recruited the Sinister Squadron to act as U.S. agents.
Huh.
Yeah, I know. I haven't quite tracked how that storyline went. I haven't been really into this volume of Avengers. That almost felt like the more interesting story to me. Why is he back, and why is he recruiting powerful supervillains to be an American super team? It's like Freedom Force all over again. As a matter of fact, there is a figure in literary history that Marvel has co-opted for its own storylines. There's a new series called Ruins of Ravencroft, and it's a miniseries that's supposed to talk about the Ravencroft Institute, which is like Marvel's version of Arkham Asylum. Mm-hmm. Except it's not where they send all the supervillains. It is just where they send truly demented people to try to get them better. Mm-hmm. And there was a special one-shot that had to do with Sabretooth. Well, in the middle of that, they were talking about different events that happened in Marvel history that people may not be aware of. And in one image, they title it as the year 1820. And the dialogue bubble, or the exposition bubble here, says, "To the rise of a spirit of vengeance." Now, we know what the spirit of vengeance is in Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
It's the Ghost Rider. And because of certain retcons and newer stories, we know that there have been Ghost Riders pretty much since the Caveman era, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just individuals who somehow managed to use demonic or fallen angel-like powers to either make an animal or a machine into a fiery chariot of some sort. Well, according to 1820, it was a man who was riding on a horse who was holding his own flaming skull.
What?
They made the Headless Horseman into a Ghost Rider in Marvel Comics history. From the Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
That's awesome.
There is something about that that's superbly fitting, isn't it?
Yeah,
Definitely.
just a bit.
I mean, now that I've seen that, that's kind of like the Cosmic Ghost Rider. I want a story about that. That sounds
Please,
awesome.
Thank you.
You know, wouldn't it be weird to see this version of the Headless Horseman who's running around trying to avenge himself against this wicked guy, Ichabod Crane, that has fooled the world into thinking he's a nice guy? That would be a great miniseries. I saw that and I was impressed. I always love it when people find interesting ways to do things. For Further on in Marvel comic news, there is going to be a reprint of the God Love Man's Kill storyline from the X-Men. It's going to be a special 2-issue director's cut coming out in April, but while I'm not really into reproductions of prior storylines, I wanted to pay attention to this because it's actually including a brand new story from the original creators of the God Love Man's Kill storyline. Chris Claremont and Brent Anderson are getting back together to create this new side story that's in the director's cut. This story was originally published back in 1982 as Marvel Graphic Novel number 5. It feels especially salient today in the times we're living in America with extreme polarization when it comes to personal beliefs. I take it by your silence you don't know what God Love Man's Kills is all about.
No.
Not familiar with it. Nope.
Okay. God Love Man Kills is basically a storyline wherein there was a bunch of very religiously fanatic people who believed that mutants were spawns of the devil, more or less. And it created this situation that included a relatively young Kitty Pryde being held at gunpoint by their religious leader. I don't know the details because obviously as a phaser, something would have had to have been wrong with her for her to be able to be held like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those storylines that I do feel resonates very much today, even though it's been 3 decades later. You know, we have so many people who are not willing to listen or consider, or even consider things with enough compassion to try to understand somebody. So, I have a feeling when this comes out, I'm going to sit down and read it, if only, not just to fill in a gap in my knowledge of Marvel history, but because this story feels important today. Speaking of the X-Men, I was going to try to surprise you guys by saying several formerly deceased X-Men are being involved in a mission, but that's not a surprise anymore.
No.
Except for the fact that this will be the first time these X-Men have actually gone on a formal X-Men mission ever. I'm assuming an explanation is necessary.
Yes.
Please.
Alright, so in April, we're going to have X-Men number 10. Now, number 10 is going to be an Empire tie-in that, again, has to do with the event of the combined Kree-Skrull armies coming to Earth. The Avengers and the Fantastic Four are fighting them, which means probably the X-Men are going to have either some kind of influence in the event, or they may end up having a little more global reach than they want right now. The difference is, though, part of the team that's assembled in number 10 to deal with whatever the threat is Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine, who I expect to be mainstays in this particular series, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're being joined by Vulcan, Petra, and Sway.
I know who Vulcan is. I don't know who the other two are.
Okay, so to fill it in for everybody who's listening, Vulcan was part of a retcon in the early 2000s. I think the storyline was called Deadly Genesis, where we find out between the original X-Men and the crew that was introduced in Giant Size, including Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and Storm, Professor X actually convinced Moira MacTaggert to take 4 mutant students and make them into a team of X-Men to work with Cyclops to rescue the originals from Krakoa. They were his first shot. They failed miserably, to the point that only Vulcan really survived, and Cyclops came back freaking out about it. Professor X wiped Cyclops' mind of this ill-fated attempt, then went on to assemble another group of mutants to rescue the originals. Those are the ones we know today. The difference is, though, Sway and Petra were 2 members of that team that never made it off Krakoa.
Oh.
They are 2 more members of the Deadly Genesis team. Between the 3 of them and Darwin, who later became he was another survivor who survived within Vulcan's body at the time, and then became a member of X-Factor. They were the Deadly Genesis X-Men. Technically, they are the second ever group of X-Men to be assembled. Now, Sway, her name implies motion, but it's really not true. She has time perception manipulation abilities. She can change time within her own specific spheres and how she perceives it. Petra has powers over stone. She's kind of like DC's Terra, except she's not as utilitarian. She doesn't control magma or things like that. However, I did see one where she compressed rock hard enough to make a diamond. So these mutants are, they're technically going on their first X-Men mission ever. Even Vulcan, I mean, when he returned, he wasn't an X-Man. He became a marauding supervillain.
The podcast you're listening to is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
I'm kind of curious to see how this one shakes out. This is going to be really weird. And the solicitation for this issue is surprisingly simple. It doesn't mention Vulcan, Sway, or Petra. All it says is, quote, Empire tie-in. The Summers family has grown a Krakoan home on the moon. Now some neighbors have moved in, unquote.
On the moon?
Yeah.
Well, you got to consider the X-Men have had both strong and antagonistic ties with a number of celestial empires in Marvel Universe.
That's true.
You know, I mean, there's the Shi'ar, who have been enemy as much as friend. That includes Gladiator. Then there's the Brood, who keep trying to make them into soldiers. And then there's the Skrulls, who co-opted some of their powers during the Secret Empire event. As well as a Skrull who replaced Wolverine for an extended amount of time.
Huh.
Their ties with alien races run a lot deeper than people expect. And last up in Marvel comic news, it's another X-Men story. And it's one of those things I got from CBR.com, although I think CBR got it wrong. I know, that's not exactly news if you've listened to us long enough.
Shock.
Well, follow me here, because it gets kind of complicated. Another new X-Men Wave 2 book has been announced. It's called Children of the Atom. Now, if you've been a long-time reader of X-Men, you know that Children of the Atom is one of the more constant subheadings for the X-Men.
Yeah.
You know, it was one of those things where during a period everybody thought that one of the things that caused mutation could be excess exposure to radiation, or maybe it just kickstarts mutation somehow. And if you take a look at the original solicitation image for this series, it does look like a basic X-Men book. And of course, now that I've said that, I'm going to share it with you.
Okay.
So as you can see from this image, it's 5 X-Men just kind of composed there very carefully in relatively classic poses, and it's their current outfits. You got Cyclops in the middle, Angel in the background, Jean Grey down front, and probably the only one that fits with the background, Nightcrawler popping in with a sword, and then Gambit in a relatively new outfit holding his cards, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the solicitation doesn't technically have to do with any of these characters.
Hmm.
According to the writer of this series, it's being done by... Actually, the original solicitation didn't include any writer for this series. Now, there was a later follow-up that said that this is being written by Vita Ayala with art by Bernard Chang. According to Vita Ayala, she said in an interview, quote, "The initial seed of the idea actually came from Chris Robinson. What if the X-Men had sidekicks? My take on it became, what would actual kids from our current time be like if they were X-Men sidekicks? What would Gen Z X-Men be like?" Unquote.
Huh.
And that is an interesting question. To my knowledge, I mean, there have been characters that have hung around each other rather strongly, but there haven't been characters that grew up idolizing the X-Men and had the goal to be any. You know, it's like Wolverine may have hung out with like Armor and Shadowcat and Jubilee for extended periods of time, but they just kind of fell into it. Nobody sat around and said, I want to be an X-Man.
Huh.
So this other image comes out, and CBR is asking the question up and down as to who these mutants could be, and they said that it's a group of characters that seem to have very similar power sets. And if you look at the image, it is pretty close to the original image. It's 5 new characters in poses very similar to the one I just showed you.
Mm-hmm.
Except, I'm looking at this image, and I'm not sure I'm looking at mutants.
Hmm.
I mean, the coincidence of people sharing power sets happens a lot in comic books. I will totally grant that. Except for 5 characters to do it that perfectly, there's something very wrong about that. And the more I look at this image, I do notice that it seems like all 5 outfits of these characters, who are all unnamed, mind you, and all share very similar powers to Angel, Jean Grey, Cyclops, Nightcrawler, and Gambit, all their outfits seem to have something grossly technological going on there.
Except for the Gambit replacement.
Yeah.
Where she is.
Doesn't seem to be, but something tells me the cards she's carrying are the device.
Maybe.
I'm not certain these are mutants at all. I think these are fanboys.
Huh.
Which wouldn't be a terrible thing. I mean, you know, goodness knows superheroes have been inspired by much worse.
Mm-hmm.
True.
You know, there have been like 3 Punishers, and there's a reason why only 2 of them are alive.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm just looking at this, and the way I see it is, you've got, in my opinion, 5 characters who are doing their best to emulate the X-Men. And while I was looking at this image, it also occurred to me that thanks to the Marauders and the review we did recently, we know that there are humans out there who worship the X-Men like mythical figures.
Yeah.
What if these are some of those people that just worship mutants and decided they wanted to be X-Men?
Hmm.
That's one thing. Where do you get the tech to do this?
Considering it's Marvel, they could have gotten it from a number of places. And I don't mean that from a legal standpoint. I mean, goodness knows. Remember, there was that short period where the New Warriors were all ex-mutants who stole technology from different Marvel supervillains and kludged together outfits.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
And then there was the U-Men who were kidnapping mutants and splicing off body parts from them to empower themselves. Humans who stole body parts from mutants.
Mm-hmm.
Ew.
So there's all kinds of ways to replicate powers, if not steal them. And my guess is for 5 characters to apparently copy powers so completely from 5 X-Men, that's not coincidence anymore. They're purposefully doing it.
Yeah, I'm looking at this image of the Cyclops replacement. That visor looks strangely like Darkhawk's visor.
Maybe it kind of reminds me of the visor Cyclops was wearing when he was part of the Phoenix Five during the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline.
Oh, not completely familiar with that one.
However, it is kind of unusual for this woman's outfit to ape Cyclops' 90s look so much.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know, the Gambit one looks like she's copying one of his, like, 2nd or 3rd outfits. The Nightcrawler one, it kind of looks like Nightcrawler's except a little bit changed. The one doing Jean Grey, I couldn't say. That's something completely original. And the one doing an Archangel impression there, that looks to be a face visor. I don't think his skin is blue. I think he's just guarding his face against the wind. So that also tells me his body isn't made to adapt against the wind. That lends more to my theory that these are technologically enhanced humans. And I'm not saying that makes a story any worse. I'm actually more intrigued by this idea simply because, like I said, nobody idolized the X-Men as far as Marvel Comics citizenry.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody looked at them as the odd man out. So
wasn't there a short time where the X-Men were kind of revered as celebrities before all this?
It was very short, but it was also a period where the Avengers were disassembled. That was the new Avengers period when they were entirely underground and nobody knew there was an Avengers squad. So there was only 2 places to call for help, the Fantastic Four or the X-Men. And this was also before Magneto joined their ranks, so yeah, people had a much better opinion of him. So I'm intrigued by this story. I would like to know a lot more about this anyway.
Actually, now I'm thinking about, there are plenty of other characters, hero or villain alike, have replicated similar power sets to every one of these.
Yeah.
I could think of like a number of Spider-Man villains that could pull this off.
Or even Spider-Man's allies.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Well, now we have DC Comic news. We're going to talk about the other major company in comics and what storylines they have coming now and in the near future. Well, Batman did it, Superman did it, Wonder Woman's going to do it, so I guess it's a matter of time before Selina Kyle gets her own 80th anniversary special. It's being done with Ed Brubaker and Cameron Stewart. This will be Brubaker's first major work for DC since 2006. He worked with Stewart and the late Darwin Cook on an acclaimed run on the Catwoman solo series back in the day. DC has already released solicitations for it. They are calling the story The Art of Picking a Lock.
Okay.
Yeah, in addition to Brubaker and Stewart's story, we will see several other talents work on this 80th anniversary special, including Paul Dini, Tom King, Mikkel Janin, Ann Nocenti, Adam Hughes, Will Pfeiffer, Steve Rude, Tula Lotay, Emanuela Lupacchino, Mindy Newell, Jim Baylant, and more. It's going to be a 100-page super spectacular. It's going on sale April 15th from DC Comics. You know what? I gotta admit, this has more interest to me than either the Batman or Superman specials. This is a chance for DC to really feature a character who could be a star, and they just never seem to pull the trigger. You disagree?
No, you have a point.
Let me see. Adam Hughes is going to illustrate the 1940s variant of this book. Travis Charest will do the 1950s. J. Scott Campbell, the 60s. Frank Cho, the 70s. Stanley Artgerm Lau will do the 1980s. Gabriel Deodato will do the 1990s. Jim Lee and Scott Williams will reunite for the 2000s. And Ji Hyung Lee will do the 2010 variant cover. Yeah, I would put Catwoman in the same category as Harley Quinn. There are characters that could actually play a major role in DC Comics if somebody would take the chance.
And write them well.
Well, not just well. The problem is positioning, because the strongest characters, for some reason, in DC Comics are often the ones with the least amount of powers and abilities. I don't know how that works. At least that's my opinion on it. And Catwoman and Harley Quinn both fit that role. I mean, they're both viciously smart in different ways. It's just a matter of figuring out how to feature them without pushing them beyond their logical capabilities.
Yeah,
I hope
definitely.
I hope it's not one of those cases where they force Catwoman to become more than an anti-hero, or suddenly Harley Quinn gets a cosmic level power-up just so she can stand next to Superman, something ridiculous like that. Because goodness knows that... Sorry?
I was saying, didn't Harley Quinn get one of those when she went to Apokalips?
She did. Thankfully, that was highly temporary, and I had a feeling that was going to be temporary, because goodness knows, the universe could not survive that.
True.
But, unfortunately, there's another character that's also getting an 80th anniversary 100-page special, and it's one that's going to make the both of you groan.
Oh, boy.
It's the one character that has no official name in DC Comics, the Joker.
Meh.
This will also go on sale in April. It will be a 100-page prestige format comic celebrating, quote, 8 decades of chaos, mischief, and mayhem, unquote. Some of the artists and writers that are working on this 100-page special include Brian Azzarello, Lee Bermejo, Paul Dini, Denny O'Neil, Scott Snyder, Tom Taylor, Jock, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, Mikkel Janin, James Tynion IV, and Riley Rossmo, with more to be announced. The stories will be apparently varied enough to represent the different eras of the Joker, ranging from the terror to humor to outright anarchy. The Joker was originally created by Bill Finger, Bob Kane, and Jerry Robinson, and first appeared in 1940's Batman #1.
#1, I thought it was the 3rd issue.
According to this, no, he first appeared in April 1940's Batman #1.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd still rather read the Catwoman one. I don't have anything against the Joker character, nor its various iterations through history. It's just kind of a case where I still feel like the less I know about the Joker, the scarier he is. I've always enjoyed him as just this weird agent of chaos throughout books. I don't think he needs an origin story or necessarily a coherent history. He's just... when he shows up, things change, and always for the worse. Ask any Robin.
Yeah.
You know, I could say you could ask Batgirl too, but that's cruel.
That is very cruel and always will be too soon.
Yeah. However, things have changed for Rick Grayson. What?
Don't like the name change.
Okay. Well, you may be interested in this because this is as of Nightwing number 68. It was done by Dan Jurgens, Travis Moore, Ronan Clickett, Nick Filardi, and World Design. It's currently on sale. And for those that don't know, Nightwing, a.k.a. Richard Grayson, a.k.a. Dick Grayson, a.k.a. the first Robin, he was shot in the head by the KGBs and lost a significant amount of his memories. Then he went to Bloodhaven, and even though Bruce Wayne tried to shock his memory back to him by revealing who he was to this amnesiac Dick Grayson, he did not accept. He kept trying to call himself Rick Grayson to be a little more current because he didn't like being called Dick. And he still decided, even with this knowledge, he did not want to be a superhero. He became a cabbie. Eventually, a group of people dressed up in various versions of Nightwing's outfits convinced him to be a vigilante. However, he was later manipulated by a still living ancestor of his, I think technically his great-great-grandfather, to become a Talon for the Court of Owls, which is arguably something he was supposed to be for all this time.
Since the 52, yeah?
Yeah, the Court of Owls is one of the few highly successful storylines out of the New 52 era.
Yeah.
Now, Fast forward to Nightwing number 68. He has been struggling with being the latest Talon and dealing with his great-grandfather. What we found out is that he's been manipulated by the Court of Owls for longer than we suspected. His amnesia, it's not because of the bullet wound he took. His grandfather has been secretly medicating him to create mental confusion and keep his memories submerged. And in Nightwing 68, he had a flood of memories come back to him. He remembers everything about being Nightwing now. And now he has fought against his grandfather and won. Whether or not this character is dead is still kind of to be determined. But he's now trying to find a new balance in his life now that he remembers all of this. He's not even sure whether or not his current girlfriend, Bee, who I believe was a bartender in this story, should call him Dick Grayson or Rick Grayson. Now he's just trying to find the way forward. So the era of Rick Grayson may be coming to a very quick end here. So people who've been waiting for the status quo to come back, you knew it was coming. You just had to be patient. And I grant you, it took a little longer than I thought. It's been, what, like 2 or 3 years now?
I'll take your word for it. I haven't read it.
I was hoping somebody could help me out here.
I was waiting for you to answer that.
Yeah, and the moment I heard that was going to happen, the name change and the amnesia, I kind of just dismissed it and forgot about it.
I never dismissed it because the storytelling potential was very large in this story. It never seemed like anybody pulled the trigger. To put it succinctly, I don't think the character of Rick Grayson ever fully established himself before he was just kind of thrust back into the world of vigilantes. I was really interested to know the storyline of a guy who knew who Batman was, but for some reason decided he didn't want the life everyone told him he was supposed to have. This could have been a great long-term story, but it just kind of... they backed out of it relatively quickly. He went back into being a vigilante too fast for my liking.
Sounds like Backlash?
I don't know. I don't quite see how Backlash fits into that. It was just too much status quo too quick.
Yeah.
Speaking of status quo, I was checking out the Legion of Superheroes recently.
Mm-hmm.
The first couple issues did not impress me, but it was the second issue where John went back to his timeline to pick up a friend to help him with the Legion. He was trying to figure out how certain things worked, and he decided Damian, his best friend in the world, would be the guy to bring forward and help him out. There is something the Legion is not telling us.
Shock.
Well, I mean... okay, so Superboy brought him forward and was showing Damian all the neat things about the Legion headquarters. But the Legionnaires were out on a mission at the time. When they arrived, they made it very clear that they were not happy about this. As a matter of fact, Brainiac 5 immediately grabbed Damian, wiped his memory of ever being in this timeline, returned him to his own time.
Huh.
Oh no.
And one of the other characters, I'm not sure which one, a Saturn Girl erased Damian's trip to the future and then sent him back to the present. And after Superboy left, while he was still trying to figure out what was going on, Dawnstar thought Chameleon Boy was making a joke by taking on the form of Robin, and Chameleon Boy answered her with, quote, "What kind of joke is that? Look at me. Hey, I'm baby Hitler. I would never do that," unquote.
Whoa.
What?
There's evidently something that's going to happen in Damian's future that is horrendous.
Well, what?
I don't know. They never detailed what he did that could be that horrible.
Something having to do with the League of Assassins? I don't know.
I don't know. Like I said, we don't know what Damian could have done that would have been that bad. And I'm never going to argue that Damian is an angel. I just think his heart is usually in the right place. But then again, this is a kid who was trained by Ra's al Ghul and Talia al Ghul. He was shown how to be a silent ninja by Bruce Wayne, and he is driven to show everyone that he can be the greatest Batman ever. You add all that up, and it's a recipe for disaster.
So does he become a monster? Because he's a little bit of a self-centered brat.
I don't know. I really don't know. It could be that the Legion of Superheroes is just a potential future. This is something that could happen. So it may be that whatever future Damien may be headed for could just be, I don't want to say subjective, but just one of the potential paths here. But either way, it indicates that something happened between Earth, or I should say DC's current timeline, and the 32nd century of the Legion of Superheroes that is just going to be terrible.
Hmm.
That almost makes you want to tune in to find out more about what they could be talking about.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, though, if you go to issue number 6, that's where the new Legionnaires from Brian Michael Bendis' current era are going to pop in at. As of the 6th issue, we're going to find out more about the current Dr. Fate of this timeline, who apparently is a woman, the Gold Lantern, and, let me see, another new character, Monster Boy. I don't think there's ever been a Monster Boy in the Legion before. So if you're curious to find out more about original creations within this, great, this is going to be your jam. If you're already screaming, not my Legion, I don't know what to tell you. You need to keep open-minded. John Romita Jr. will be working with Brian Michael Bendis again on Action Comics. Yeah, the two of them are reuniting. I don't know where they've worked before, but they're going to be working on an unknown issue of Action Comics upcoming. That's a pretty good team. John Romita Jr.'s art style has not been my jam technically, but he has a very intense vibe that does create some really memorable images.
I've always liked his art.
It's been a little square for my liking, but it has serious impact. From what I can tell, though, the storyline in Action Comics is going to have to do with the leader of the Leviathan faction meeting up with Apex Lex and his Legion of Doom. And I don't know if you recall, but the leader of Leviathan is actually the first Manhunter from DC Comics.
Oh, that's news.
Okay, I thought everybody was aware of that. They revealed that at the end of the Leviathan Rising miniseries.
Mm.
Well, CBR, I guess, kind of put this correctly. A DC superhero went to jail after they found their Super Saiyan form.
What?
I know.
Come again?
Okay, so The Flash number 86 by Joshua Williamson and Rafa Sandoval. The Flash has been having a fight with one of his worst enemies in his rogues gallery, Captain Cold. Captain Cold has gotten a power-up. He's not using a pistol. Somehow his powers have been kind of internalized due to technology. And Barry Allen ended up going one-on-one with Leonard Snart, who's now called King Cold, which sounds like it just needs Mucinex, and it's fine.
That's a deep, easy villain.
Yeah. But Barry managed to dig deep within the well of his own power to counteract King Cold's new enhanced abilities. The new abilities came from a gift by Apex Lex.
Huh.
But Barry's powers flared to such a degree, he started to glow gold, and his powers flared hard enough that he was able to free everyone frozen by King Cold. However, when he went gold, all of a sudden it seems like his emotions got the better of him because the Flash became angrier and angrier, and Barry Allen beat Leonard Snart within an inch of his life.
Whoa.
He could not stop himself. He was yelling in rage. He called King Cold a joke, a loser, and a waste of life.
Wow, that's not stuff you hear from the Flash at all.
No, Barry Allen
sounds
is
more like Vegeta.
Yeah, Barry Allen is a thinking superhero. He's always concerned with people. He usually cracks small jokes, but life has always been his biggest concern. And believe it or not, Golden Glider, who Barry had teamed up with to stop King Cold, had to help restrain Barry and help him, come down from this, whatever it was. The police showed up, they arrested both Cold and Glider, and the Flash told the police to take him in as well because his powers have apparently flared in a way he's not confident he can control. I'm not quite sure how to take this because it is a good idea to have the Flash's powers not be as finely controlled as they have been for I don't know how long now. Except, I'm still trying to figure out how the Flash's powers affect him emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite get how that works. Then again, I don't quite understand how Barry gets his powers from the Speed Force, yet the action of Barry running generates the Speed Force. There's still so many things about his power set that make my bald head hurt.
And they always find little loopholes to give him different powers or change them or
Mm-hmm.
the...
They do it for all of them.
They
Well,
do.
Yeah, but his are weird and
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how a treadmill allows him to travel through time.
because plot.
I mean, it's a cosmic treadmill. It's a specifically built treadmill to allow him to travel through time. I'm still not sure how running in place allows you to travel through time.
Cosmic treadmill. Let's revisit that.
Can we not?
88 miles an hour.
Shut up.
How many gigawatts or gigawatts?
1.21 gigawatts.
There we go.
I'd rather be visited by 1.21 gigolos.
Ew.
There's another Flash, though, that's had a power shift, and that is Wally West. He's been going through the Flash Forward miniseries, which was supposed to be his redemption arc after Heroes in Crisis, the event that saw Wally accidentally, and I do say firmly, accidentally killed about a dozen superheroes at the Sanctuary, the residence where heroes were supposed to get some form of mental assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as of issue 5 of this book, he's done something that should be impossible for any Flash. Now, to back up, he's been sent into the dark multiverse by this robot called the Tempest Fugonaut, some kind of robot that observes the multiverse. He was given a new outfit that was supposed to... Augment's not the word I'm looking for, but I guess if you're given a special outfit by a cosmic android, it's going to augment your powers in certain ways. And there is one world that could destroy the multiverse on a whole if it's not destroyed by the Flash. And the reason why Wally West is necessary is because somehow this dark multiverse world is made out of his own fears. It's also the place where his kids from the original timeline are somehow trapped. If you're asking me to unwind all this, I can't. I still don't understand all of DC's continuity.
I'm not sure anyone does.
I'd like to say there's somebody, but I have a feeling I'm not truthful in that way. But anyway, there's an image of him running in these gigantic blue streaks all over this dark multiverse planet. He's trying to destroy the dark matter on it, and he has a device that allows him to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
According to the exposition bubbles on this single page, it says, quote, "I push myself further and faster than anyone has ever moved before, faster than light and thought, faster than the speed force. I race around the globe and purge the darkness, leaving light in my wake. It may rearrange itself fast, but I'm Wally West, the fastest father in the multiverse," unquote. Now, the phrase that requires special attention there is that he said he ran, quote, "faster than the speed force," unquote. That shouldn't be possible for any Flash.
No.
Does that have to do with his augmented suit by the Tempest Fugonaut? Possibly, but that seems like too overly simplified an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say if there's something else at play here, because Wally has broken several speed records at Barry Allen's set.
Yeah.
I still don't think they've been broken to this day. I think Wally's ran faster than any other Flash alive.
Yeah.
The only one who may go faster eventually is Bart, if he's ever allowed to grow up and stay alive. It seems like the one time he's grown up, DC was quick to kill him. So I'm curious to know the story behind this. How did he run faster than the Speed Force? And if he did that, what are the sources of his power now? Could this be one of the reasons why what happened at Sanctuary happened? Because his powers at some point from his shift from the New 52 to Rebirth have changed, and he's not accessing the same abilities that he thought he was. Maybe I'm asking the wrong questions, but it feels like a salient point to ask. Especially since Wally was the only one to survive with full memory of where he's been prior to that point. Well, another hero who's gotten probably the worst team name ever is in DC Comics. As you guys know, Billy Batson is Shazam. Whether it be from the movies or the comic books, it's the same kid, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas in the comics, he has shared his abilities with 6 other individuals, including his biological father. Not his foster father, his biological father, Billy Batson Sr. And now there are 7 people with the approximate powers of Shazam running around as a crew trying to do right. And in Shazam number 10, which is on sale as of this week, by Jeff Johns and Dale Eaglesham and Scott Collins. Now, the Shazam family doesn't have an official team name that they've given anybody. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're just 7 very powerful people. Unfortunately, one member of this family spoke up to the media and may have given them the worst superhero team name I've ever heard.
Let's hear it.
Well, according to a news feed from a monitor, there's one in gray, and I'm sorry, I don't know the names of the various members of the Shazam family. And he looks towards the camera and says, "You see that? One zap of my magical lightning did the trick on that tank. You can thank me anytime." And then the cameraman asks, "Who are you?" "Call us the Shocking Seven."
Boo.
Not as bad as Super Friends though. Let's be honest.
I would rather be a super friend.
Super Friends is a product of the time.
Yeah, the Shocking Seven sounds more like something unspeakable you do.
Fair enough.
I'm picking my words
again,
carefully here. We are a family-friendly show, but that does not sound like something you ever want to do in someone else's presence.
Well, the Fantastic Four, I mean, they had to have some sort of...
The Fantastic Four was a product of the time as well. The Shocking Seven is not a product of this time or any other time.
So it's just lazy writing on DC's part? Shocker.
Well,
oh no,
I'm
alliteration. Marvel.
I am sure it's not going to be constant or permanent. But even if you are a 12-year-old, I expect a better name.
Maybe they did ask a 12-year-old.
Well, that's the thing. With the exception of Billy Batson Sr., all of the Shazam family are kids in the same foster family.
So they came up with their own name. There you go.
Well, one of them came up with a name. I doubt they asked the others. It's kind of like when Kitty Pryde just said, "We're the Marauders." Oh, you didn't ask us that.
Yep.
Last up in DC comic news, the Strange Adventures miniseries. We may have finally figured out what's going on with the unknown co-star of this miniseries. This is the miniseries by Tom King that's supposed to be a follow-up in the vein of his Vision miniseries and the Mr. Miracle miniseries. He is tearing down another long-known DC superhero to create a brand new story. In this case, it's Adam Strange, the adventurer scientist who is usually found on the DC alien world of Rann.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been 2 images released from a Twitter account called Doc Shaner, which apparently is from series artist Evan Shaner. Now, there's 2 images that were released of this cover, one of which is relatively mundane. The other has a rather unsubtle hint as to who else can be in this series, because there's a number of characters that could be in here. There's a lot of alien characters in DC lore. I'm sharing the first image with you so you can take a look, and as you can see, it's Adam Strange, missing the top half of his uniform, kneeling down at night in an alien desert.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks despondent. He looks like he just got his butt kicked, doesn't he?
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's something like a smoldering wreck behind him.
That's probably his jetpack. He's one of those characters that was created during a very pulpy era, and while his look has been updated, his gear has largely been the same. You know, a helmet with a fin on it, a jetpack, and a laser blaster.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm not saying that makes him a bad character. It's just he leans heavily on that pulpy kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you take that, and there is another image, which I guess is a variant to issue 2 of this miniseries, that has him in the exact same pose, except he's in his full outfit, which has bloody palm prints on it, but there's very telling objects in the background behind him calling lies.
Ruh-roh.
Huh.
So you see him there, just kneeling into an empty space.
Mm-hmm.
Still carrying that pistol. All of his uniform is there, the bloody smears on it and on the gloves. But the objects that are screaming lie are the T-spheres of Mr. Terrific.
Yep.
Hmm.
That would seem to be a pretty heavy indication as to who's going to assist him on this book.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Terrific, I still don't understand a lot about him. He was one of those characters that came about originally, as far as I know, from a 1980s, 1990s version of the Justice Society. And after one of DC's retcon multiversal collapses, he ended up in regular DC canon. But I can't even tell you his real name. I see him that infrequently. However, I do know that he's usually registered as one of the top 3 smartest people in DC Comics overall. And his powers are almost entirely in his scientific acumen. He creates devices to help him with his superheroic activities, and then the T-spheres are just kind of his autonomic drones that he uses as assistants. He knows how to fight, I wouldn't put him on like the level of, say, Lady Shiva or Bruce Wayne or, I'm not even sure he's in the league of Wildcat technically, but he's adequate enough.
The podcast you're listening to is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
Michael Holt.
Thank you. The two of them together on this mini, it may create something new. I'm always willing to give Tom King's stuff a try. He creates really original stories on characters that are often either done to death or just nobody's ever thought about looking at them in this light before. However, I will admit that Tom King stuff for me is very hit and miss. I really enjoyed Vision. I really enjoyed Heroes in Crisis. Was not a fan of Mr. Miracle.
Mm-hmm.
As far as his Batman ongoing, I have nothing wrong with it, conceptually or even in the execution. However, I'm not sure I have the patience for 85 issues of one story. And that's coming from a long-term comic reader. I'm just not that big of a Batman person. Last up is general comic and convention news. This is where we talk about comic books that are not Marvel or DC related, as well as conventions happening all around the world, and I have very few bits of information for you this time around. As we've discussed, Comic-Con International has started the early bird hotel sale for San Diego Comic-Con. If you're interested, you can already get a hotel room that's very far away. However, you have to pay the entirety of your hotel stay up front to guarantee those hotels.
Wow.
Yeah, it costs a mint. And you're not getting a reduced rate. You're pretty much just getting a guaranteed hotel room, which is, it's not a bad price. However, I always like to roll the dice simply because, again, those can be far away. It can be like a 45-minute shuttle ride on a bad day.
Whoa.
So I would rather try to get somewhere closer. However, the other convention that Comic-Con International puts on yearly, WonderCon, has announced their fourth wave of special guests. This convention is happening from April 10th through 12th at the Anaheim Convention Center in California. And this wave includes the writer of Venom, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Baby Teeth, Donny Cates. One of the writers of Superman, Elliot S. Magan. The author of When We Were Alone and Strangers, David Robertson. The author of Rogue Squadron I Jedi, Michael Stackpole. And a cartoonist on archival quality, Christina Steens Stewart. More special guests are going to be announced in about a week. I'm getting more excited for WonderCon. I love going to that convention because it has a lot of industry stuff minus Marvel. I still don't know why Marvel doesn't decide to visit this, considering they're in the backyard of Disney down there. Maybe it's because Marvel's still based in New York and it's not exactly convenient to get their people out there. However, it's got this nice balance between industry and fan interest. There's a lot of comic book cosplay at that convention. And I mean a lot. Almost an uncomfortable amount. Huge photo shoots. And while there's probably technically more cosplayers that wander around Comic-Con, it's much harder to get people to congregate because the schedule for San Diego Comic-Con is slammed with things to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just way harder to get people to gather up. Although it's not like WonderCon's a slouch either. It was last year there that I got to see the first episode of the new season of She-Ra for Netflix.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a nice aside. A lot of She-Ra cosplayers, some really good-looking stuff, too.
Like classic or the new outfit?
A little bit of both.
Cool.
Of course, one of the scenes they debuted during the viewing there was the snippet of the episode where they were playing like Dungeons and Dragons, and then they had like characters that the new characters playing their older selves from the 1980s cartoon.
Oh yeah.
Watching Bo and Katra go through a host of cat-related puns.
It was painful, but
it was hilarious smarm. It was great.
Yes.
There's that point where I'm sitting there as a 40-year-old man going, oh my god, my entertainment was that stupid when I was a kid.
Basically.
What do you mean was?
Oh no, was. It's much better today. I'm not saying it's great, but it's better.
They were acknowledging it while also kind of poking fun at it.
Yep.
Which I can appreciate.
Previews World also put out a list of the best-selling comic books of the 2010s, the last decade. They put up the top 100, and as we discussed last week, Star Wars #1 from, I believe it was 2014 2014? Or was it 2015? That ended up as the number 1. Yeah, it was 2015 from Marvel Comics. It doesn't have units here. I was kind of surprised when I was reading through the top 10 how many of these were independent and how many of these were Star Wars. Believe it or not, number 10 on this list was Star Wars Vader Down, number 1. Number 2 was Detective Comics 1000. Number 3 was Amazing Spider-Man, number 1. 4 was Secret Wars, number 1. 5 was Action Comics 1000. 6 was Bravest Warriors Tales, Hollow John, number 1, from Boom Studios. I'm not even familiar with what that is. Number 7, Orphan Black, number 1, from IDW Publishing. Number 8 was Dark Knight 3, Master Race, number 1. Number 9, Amazing Spider-Man 800. When you get into 11 through 20, there's some really surprising stuff in here. Number 11 on the list of the 100 best-selling issues of the last decade. Big Trouble in Little China / Escape from New York, number 1, by Boom Studios. Where Snake Plissken met Jack Burton face to face. 2 versions of Kurt Russell having a smarmy off. Number 12 was Batman number 50. Number 13 was Civil War number 2, number 1. Number 14 was Fantastic Four number 1. 15, Harley Quinn number 1. Man, that just adds fuel to the fire that I think DC really needs to lean on Quinn a bit more as a feature character. Number 16, Walking Dead 100. 17, Walking Dead number 115. Number 18, Champions number 1 was a high seller.
Really?
Yeah, I'm surprised too. I think I got a copy of that too. Number 19, Justice League of America number 1. Number 20, Walking Dead number 132. I believe that was the final issue of the Walking Dead series. So, there's a lot of number 1s in here, but there's also a lot of surprises. I mean, Princess Leia number 1 ended up at number 37. Black Cat at number 42. Batman Who Laughs at number 44. Venom number 1 at 46. Absolute Carnage number 1 at 50. Star Wars number 2 ended up on the list at number 59. Man, Star Wars is big for Marvel this year. House of X number 1 ended up at number 66. Powers of X ended up at 79. Uncanny X-Men number 1, I believe it was from 2012, ended up at 96. Even Star Wars Poe Dameron hit this list at number 100.
Oh.
Go figure. Last up in general comic and convention news. Speaking of things that were entertaining when I was a child, something is getting a new original graphic novel that's adapted by Eisner Award-winning cartoonist Chris Grine. It's based on a series of 1990s books written by K.A. Applegate and Michael Grant. Any guesses?
G.I. Joe?
It's a good guess, but no.
Ninja Turtles.
No? I'll give you one more shot between the two of you. 1990s books.
Books.
Yep.
Oh, Animorphs.
Yes!
Yes!
The Animorphs are getting a new graphic novel set for release on October 6th. The entire project was scripted, drawn, and colored by Chris Grine, who is a self-confessed Animorphs fan.
I miss those books.
According to Grine, he told AV Club, quote, "It's a huge relief to finally be able to share what I've been working on over the last year. I love this series and can't wait to share it with the fans who've been wanting this to happen for so long," unquote. The Animorphs, the stories of a bunch of kids who, for reasons that are a bit mysterious to me, were able to transform into animals.
They had alien tech, and it was kind of like nanites, but not, and they touched the cube, and then they could absorb DNA and then transform their bodies.
Okay, what you just said makes about 10 times more sense to me than the story of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Cool.
I'm not saying I get it all that well, but it's like, well, that makes more sense than the world being left to the fate of a card game.
Well, then there were these alien slugs that go in your ear and then can control your brain by crawling into it, and that gave me nightmares for a long time.
Okay, now it makes about as much...
pulled from Star Trek.
Now it makes about as much sense as Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yes and no. And then there was this alien that was, what's his name? Axe. He had like 4 hooves like a deer, but like a centaur, but with the horns of a giraffe. He was all blue, but
Four
he could
eyes?
shapeshift into a human.
Okay, I'm not going to sleep well tonight. The subject of this week is The Female Furies by DC Comics, a miniseries from 2019 detailing supposedly some of the earliest adventures of a group of, I guess you could say, Darkseid's top lieutenants. The original creation of these characters is unknown to me, but this miniseries was written by Cecil Castellucci, the art is by Adriana Mello, colors by Hi-Fi, and letters by Carlos Mangual. And, I gotta admit, I am a very upbeat person when it comes to stories. I do my best to understand things as they come. This series left me scratching my head.
In what way? Like their origins, or what made them turn so quickly?
In a couple ways. I mean, as far as I know from the stories in DC Comics, unless I've missed something in a retcon, I don't remember the Female Furies ever rebelling so thoroughly against Apokalips in general.
Me either.
Also, I wasn't aware of the character of Ariel, and I can't say if this was something created for this miniseries, or if it's something that I'm just not aware of in DC's convoluted history. And then, the way the whole thing resolved, I cannot tell if this miniseries fits into any form of continuity. At all.
It doesn't. I was trying to figure that out, too.
Did you ask anybody? Because yeah, I don't know many DC fans, so I didn't know anybody to talk to about it. Does any of this make sense?
Canonically, no. Not that I could tell. Especially the part with the planet breaking up toward the end, and I was like, wait, did this even happen? Is this a thing, or do they just do a little pocket universe for this miniseries to make plot happen? Then it didn't really, how DC likes to do.
Yeah, there were no markers on this saying that it's from the Black Label or that it's any sort of Vertigo or Elseworlds type thing. So I have to assume this is some sort of canon, except everything in my brain, with the limited knowledge I have on DC, tells me that it's not. And there were even some weird character shifts in here that don't match up to anything I know about certain members of the cast. This primarily has to do with the female Furies, who were specialized kind of hunter killers for Apocalypse's reign on Darkseid's reign on Apokalips. Almost mixed up my villains there. And when the first couple images came out of 6 of them standing there, I was aware of most of them, including Bernadette in the back, although I don't know how. But the one up front, Ariel, who was later identified as his team's field leader, unfortunately, because of her very limited design, she struck me as the instant red shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying they didn't try on her design, but in the end, it was so basic compared to every other thing on this page. I just looked at it and said, you're going to be dead by issue 3.
Yeah. Well, she made it past issue 3, didn't she?
I don't believe she did, but we'll figure that out as we go.
Issues.
Neither was I. Something else that struck me very early on here in the first 10 pages was that the writing in this book by it was Castellucci is not subtle at all.
No.
And I'm trying to be very clear here, because I am very aware that there are misogynistic characters as well as a history of the same within American society. It's very obvious to me. Mm-hmm. You kind of have to be brain dead to miss it. However, for some reason, Darkseid and his top lieutenants on the planet of Apokalips somehow went from being these overbearing, mythical type, new god characters, as DC put them, to just kind of being an annoying boardroom in this series.
Mm-hmm. Full of knuckle-dragging, misogynistic jerks.
I'm almost amazed they didn't whip out cigars and brandy at some point.
Maybe that was in a deleted scene.
I guess. Did that strike anybody else as odd? Because none of them really struck me as malevolent. In fact, a lot of them struck me as weirdly inept.
Yep.
And I'm saying that, again, I'm a Marvelite. I don't generally read DC voluntarily or on my own time, but I'm always open-minded. I like to think that I can find something new as long as I just sit down and read it. And somehow this series just... nothing added up to what I know about DC.
Yeah. When I heard about it coming out, I was like, oh, cool. Barda. I know Barda. Okay.
I mean...
I wasn't familiar with the others. Like, I'd heard a few of the names here and there, but I was like, all right, I'll read this. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing what I expected whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with the female Furies because they appear occasionally in different DC comics, and then during certain storylines in the animated series during the 90s, they appeared somewhat heavily. You know,
yeah, and they're strong enough to go toe-to-toe with Superman.
Yeah,
so.
Stampa, Lashina, and Mad Harriet, very aware of those, and Big Barda, of course, has been both hero and villain, so you know that name. She's been on the League a couple times. Ariel, I was pretty sure she was a red shirt, but who knows? Maybe there's something about that I don't know. But
Actually,
I mean,
she is new to this.
She is new to this?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Now,
I didn't know her either.
Yeah, now, I mean, in the middle of the first issue, when Darkseid and his council of close compatriots there are trying to judge the Furies, and they immediately put them into swimsuit competitions, baking competitions, evening gown competitions.
That is denigrating.
I didn't feel like it was denigrating just to the characters. I felt like it was denigrating as a reader.
It was.
And as a woman, I'm sitting here seething like, oh, let me at him. Let me at him.
It goes to the same kind of problem I had watching Transformers as a kid. And I know that sounds odd, but when I was watching the original Transformers, it was very weird to watch robots on an alien planet who had such colloquial human names, including one that was named Jazz. You had a robot on an alien planet who didn't turn into anything earthen, yet was somehow named after one of the most uncontrollable musical styles on Earth. That's weird. It's the same kind of feeling here when you have Darkseid, a character who, for all intents and purposes, is a living source of entropy in the DC universe, who has agreed to judge a group of women in a bake-off.
This is beneath him.
It was uncharacteristic, which was even more confusing. But then also, the feminist in my head is just like, no, I hate this, or, you know, of course, raging. But
yeah.
I know kind of what the planet's like and where they come from, but this was in your face. They kicked it up probably 10 notches.
The series could have done with some subtlety. If some things were told with a certain context, or just even a more sly demeanor, it would have been something. But you have a group of male characters in this comic who are basically lacking the greasy mustaches to twirl when they speak. It is that just obvious and painful.
Painful.
You know, I mean, Willick, who sexually assaulted Ariel during a large part of the first issue here, was so painfully unsubtle about it, and yet every time Ariel complained to anyone, whether it be Granny Goodness or Barda or anybody else in the Furies, no one would even attempt to take her at her word, even though she's their field leader.
That bothered me too, and it didn't make any sense, because if they, you know, trust her word as a field leader, why not even for the smallest inkling of a, well, what if, or hey, let's hear her out. It bothered me on a personal level, like, okay, she's definitely going through this.
I was just as amazed.
Why did nobody listen to the victim here?
Yeah, as a guy, I was just as amazed. I mean, I know that apocalyptic society is often very cutthroat. It's like the Empire in Star Wars. You can get a promotion by killing the guy above you as long as you're smart enough. But it seemed like everybody in this miniseries, and I mean this in the best possible way, was as dumb as a brick. And
they were definitely classic old-time villains, like, you know, rubbing their palms together.
Well, not even the villains. I mean, even the women in this series were so weirdly catty. It's almost like everything in this miniseries was written to tell you that nobody believes a woman. Not even a woman. It's all very jarring.
It seemed
more like a soapbox than a storyline.
It is, but I mean, I know bare bones stuff about Apocalypse and the people there, and I kind of feel like this sexism is kind of far beneath them for as high of a society as they're supposed to be. I'm using the term society loosely here.
But they had this very rigid caste system where women were beneath the men.
No, I
Yeah.
understand that. I think what Jesse's trying to say, though, is that Apocalypse in Society is, like, more cultish than it is freeform. And because everybody worships Darkseid so vehemently, you'd almost expect them to be more rigid of a society, rather than the... I don't know. I agree with him. It seems like every male here was just like one lick away from being that stereotypical sexual offender in like every other PSA you've ever seen in junior high.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, I had a thought here. Yeah, no, Apocalypse Society is basically, might makes right. So if you're stronger, you're respected, or feared, and no one messes with you.
Yet it's all the
Regardless
weaselly
of
thin guys who are rubbing up against all these strong females.
They could get their necks snapped. I think that they should have, obviously.
Well, a couple
And
did.
others-
I mean, in the first issue, the nephew of Steppenwolf showed up and they slit his throat, or Ariel slit his throat in a combination of mental anguish over being sexually assaulted, combined with just stop talking about me as if I'm second class.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, I still feel that the Furies, can go toe to toe with Superman, so they are plenty strong in their own right next to the common citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they were driving home the point that, yes, despite the fact that they're so strong, they are mentally controlled and their minds are keeping them from realizing, oh, hey, I can take them out. Why are they controlling me? And when that realization comes, they're empowered both in mind and body then. And then they have that revolution. But it takes the Daydreamer,
Beautiful Dreamer, the Apocalyptic Revolutionary.
which is, I'll deal with her name later.
Yeah.
It doesn't make. I get that the chains that they have are mental ones; they're not actual physical ones. And honestly, mental and emotional manipulation and abuse really can be more harmful and longer lasting
Mm-hmm.
scars than physical abuse.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that kind of felt how it was being portrayed, but there wasn't enough.
There wasn't enough helpful dialogue in here to ever bring that across. I mean, most of the time the Furies were lied to in several different respects, to both each other and because it seems like in this version of things, Granny Goodness didn't teach them any sort of personal survival.
Not at all. She taught them to be subservient to her and to be obedient. So even though they didn't want to do something, she told them to, and they said, okay, I'll obey.
Yeah.
But they should have fleshed that out a bit. I feel like they lost a lot of momentum in not showing that. Like, I wanted more of a climax, more of a realization, like, hey, wait, we're stronger. We outnumber them. Why are we listening to them? Why are we letting them control us? There wasn't that epiphany.
There was.
It just kind of pittered out.
There was that epiphany towards the end of the third issue when Ariel died and Big Barda saw what the result of Willick's extreme abuse against her was. But it came so quickly and without provocation because Barda at this point had only asked the most basic of questions about why are you so sad all the time before she suddenly died, and Barda became a revolutionary because of more or less a group of coincidences, not because it felt like a character moment.
Right, and they could have played that up. They could have made that something really powerful, and they missed the opportunity.
Yeah. And I want to say that the art by Adriana Mello didn't help here. It seemed like every female character, including Granny Goodness, had extreme amounts of eyeshadow and mascara going on, and their faces always look sunken. Like, even though they're trying hard not to be these beauty queen characters that the males keep representing them as, yet somehow that's all they looked like to me in looking at this series.
Yeah, they all had the glam makeup.
Yeah, I mean, even Mad Harriet with the green, almost fuzzy skin and the wild hair looked like she had busted out of a beauty salon about half an hour beforehand.
Yeah.
So, there was a lot of conflicting information passing through my head, both visually and in the dialogue here. The thing with Beautiful Dreamer didn't resonate with me emotionally when she accidentally connected with the Furies and Granny Goodness because it all happened so quickly. Same thing with Ariel. It seemed like one image of her being a dancer instead of a fighter, and suddenly Ariel's second-guessing everything about her life. That was fast.
Admittedly, I did like that there's another facet of these characters other than Apocalypse soldiers.
No, don't misunderstand me. If this was played up over a longer period of time, it would have made more sense. But for this one image to be all it took for Ariel to second-guess everything instead of just beginning to question it was too much for me.
Yeah, they needed to take a little more time and explain that. Like, what were these, like, secret fantasies? Like your heart's biggest desire? They showed Bardo with a husband and a child. They showed Ariel as a dancer.
Mad Harriet solving equations. I mean...
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
And, Lashra?
Lashina.
As the leader. Lashina, yeah. As the leader, you know, becoming the leader.
Yeah.
And the other one killing her brother. And so these are like their secret desires, but none of them were motivation or compelling enough to actually have them have this massive epiphany.
Or even give you enough emotional resonance to follow along. I mean, we don't know if these are things that will affect any of these characters long term, and at some points, with Lashina suddenly becoming a leader, and even with Mad Harriet, it all felt more like a joke than it did a reason to actually empathize with anybody.
Right, and they missed that opportunity to make the reader care.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even Darkseid, the images of him sipping wine and then talking about fathering children, I keep having to remind myself that he's not a biological entity. I mean, why is all this so important to this character? I almost have to ask myself if Castellucci was ever really given any sort of DC Bible to work from. It felt like he learned about these characters the same way I did. He watched some cartoons and then decided, okay, I can write a story.
Because plot.
I don't know. You know, even the images of Ariel fighting, when they describe her kicks looking like dancing, it looked more like she was dancing than ever attempting fighting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the composition in this artwork was just really stiff for me.
Mm-hmm.
And even when Barda actually met Scott Free, who was just an apocalyptic soldier at this time, her interest in him came so quickly, it was whiplash.
Yeah, and they did have a brief flashback to where they saved each other in like some sort of arena as kids, but that's still not enough emotional motivation to have that quick. It's like she just became obsessed and fixated on this man, and women don't actually function like that, men, just saying.
Yeah.
At least not the healthy
ones. She just
ones.
wanted to quit. Well, that's fair. There's some crazy ones.
Mm-hmm.
But she just became fixated on him and wanted to rebel just to be with him.
Yeah, the motivations were all over the place. Somehow it's like they wanted to present the apocalyptic males as no better than 1980s misogynists, yet the women in the series were portrayed like 1950s housewives.
Basically.
And, I mean, even the scene in late in issue 3 where Ariel's, like, begging the other Furies not to force her to go see Willock, the guy that's been tormenting her. They practically shove her out the door, which gives Willock the opportunity to kill her via these weird cosmic-powered burning dance boots. It was brutal, and that was about the only time I felt any sort of empathy, because the way Ariel died was downright pathetic.
It reminded me of a fairy tale. The Evil Queen had to put on the shoes, and I think it was the original Snow White fairy tale.
Yeah.
To dance at the princess and the prince's wedding until she died.
Yeah, but I mean, the image of Ariel afterwards pretty much burned black from the mid-thigh down and just trembling. It was horrifying. And after that, she's summarily buried by the end of issue 3 here. So it seemed like all the character growth that was put into Ariel in a very short amount of time was just kind of ripped apart.
Yep.
And from there, it really becomes a story about Barda and the eventual insurrection she leads here. And again, Barda had a very similar story arc to Ariel. She didn't have the abuse that Ariel went through, but she went through this very quick rise to become not just leader of the Furies, but the leader of an entire revolution against the male authority of Apokalips that, again, as far as I can tell in DC canon, never actually occurred.
Mm-hmm.
So it made the whole thing even more confusing. Now I don't know if it's even worth talking about this miniseries because I can't guarantee it has any sort of facet to anything else going on in DC. Doomsday Clock makes more sense to me than this.
Wow.
That's saying a lot.
I know! And I don't say that lightly. But, I mean, Willick is supposedly going through personal training sessions with Barda, but he's smart enough to know that he can't muscle Barda into doing anything, so he just ends up being petty. And, I think the perfect way that all this sums up as far as what the writer thinks about the Furies is that when Granny Goodness discovers that Willick is dead and thinks that this is her chance to rise in the ranks, and she walks in there, and the next time they meet, one of the other lieutenants of Darkseid has just brought in his idiot, nephew who calls people bro to take Willick's place on the council instead of Granny, who's shown that she's not just opportunistic, but she's cutthroat enough to take the opportunities. She's smart enough to place herself, yet they decide this weird little weasel is the one that's going to take her place?
Because he's male.
And that's the sole reason?
And nepotism, it's his nephew.
I know, but I mean, I'm not even a fan of Darkseid as a character, but I give him more credit to think that it requires more than simply a pair of, male chromosomes to be a leader in a galactic empire.
Right, he's definitely smarter than that.
Yes. I mean, as far as I know, the one in DC Comics leans on Granny Goodness and the female Furies to not lead his armies necessarily, but to at least enforce his will on seek and destroy missions. So for him to dismiss all of them so frequently and utterly, I have trouble resolving this in my head.
Right, because why would he even have them if he didn't care about them or it didn't serve him and he didn't...
Because he likes bake-offs, evidently.
Well, not really. He didn't like the baking. But yeah, you're right. It didn't fit, and I'm scratching my head. I was like, okay, you're trying to get us mad and empathize with them, yet I have no sense of when, where, or context.
And you're also trying to vilify these characters but they're already villains. I mean,
they're not just villains. They're unlikable. Sorry.
Yeah, no, they're irredeemable villains.
Mm-hmm. There's nothing to really empathize with as the villains, even to understand what their neuroses are. They're so obvious and just plain that it's like an evil version of Yo Gabba Gabba. I mean, even the weird shift that happened so quickly with the Furies in issue 5, they followed Barda and Mr. Miracle to Earth, and their simple exposure to Earth culture was enough to make them second-guess everything on Apokalips after an afternoon?
This is a bad fan fiction.
That's, you know what? You hit the nail on the head. It seems like one.
You know what? Let's just go ahead and wrap this up, because I get the more detail we talk about, the more irritated all of us are getting.
Yes.
And, I grant you, we've got 15 to 20 minutes left in this recording. However, we've really kind of nailed or at least hit on just about everything going on here already.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said, I'm an optimist. I go into every story, even with characters I don't like Bruce Wayne and Superman, and think there's probably something in here I'm going to enjoy. But somehow, this Female Furies miniseries has torn down just about everything I respected about nearly every character here and replaced it with the weirdest stereotypes and cliches in comic books. And all I'm left with is a group of irritations because I'm not a fan of the art. I think the characters are misserved from the top to the bottom. And it's a storyline that is so in your face with everything that is, wrong with Western societies that there's just really nothing likable to grasp hold of here.
Mm-hmm. It feels also preachy, like they're shoving it down your throat with how bad it is, but then they're not making you care enough about wanting that change for the characters in it.
Yeah, and it's even weirder to think that Lashina, Stampa, and Mad Harriet, by the end of this, turn into pseudo-heroes, yet you're still given so little time with any of these characters and their motivations, you don't really feel like you're pulling for any of them to get better. They're just kind of there. And Man, I can't say I would even recommend this to the DC fans I know, because nothing about this matches up with any DC storyline I've ever been aware of.
Yeah,
It's too heavy-handed.
Well, it's heavy-handed without actually fitting into anything. I mean,
Yeah.
in DC Comics, the apocalyptic world has been long destroyed. So this is obviously a prequel tale. I mean, Barda's a member of the Furies at this point, like she was. I'm very much aware of that. I've never heard of a story where the other Furies joined with Barda on any sort of retaliatory action. They have been Darkseid is for the entirety of their existence. That, again, I'm aware of.
In fact, from my understanding, they hate her for leaving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the turn here was so quick. I just have no emotional resonance here. You know, this is one of the few stories that I can say I can't give this to anybody. I would have buried this. You know, if it wasn't an assignment, I would have given up after issue 3.
Really, I would have given up after the first couple of pages.
Wow.
No, seriously, you know, having read through this whole thing, and I thought about how could I make this actually appetizing, and I thought of a way to do it while still keeping the elements they have in here in the name.
I just got really excited when I was like, "Oh, Barda, cool! Maybe we'll find out something new. Maybe it'll be like an early series." Or no, I was so disappointed.
I mean,
I feel disappointed that I suggested it because it was so disappointing.
Hey, I've offered to read Dark Knight's Metal at one point. I regret that with every fiber of my being. So, you know,
Sure.
there are stories out there that sometimes have characters we really enjoy that just do not land well.
Yep.
I was just so gobsmacked by this series. I was so surprised.
Mhm.
You know, and I'm like you. I think Barda's an incredible character who's honestly usually underserved by DC Comics. She's either dressed as a psychotic samurai or she's in a red one piece. But even though she's one of the physically strongest characters they have.
Yep.
So I was looking at this as a chance to reinvent the character and really kind of reframe her history, similar to the Mr. Miracle or Vision stories. Instead, we just
but they didn't.
No, instead it just kind of... It didn't regress her, but it definitely didn't do her any favors.
I was so sad because, like I said, Barda's one of the few that, I mean, I think could easily take Superman, Wonder Woman, maybe both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to pull out, who's Barda, you say? Haha, here. When discussing who the strongest DC or Marvel character, you know, who could take who, there's been tons of debates that I've overheard. And nobody knows who Barda is. I'd really like for them to know who Barda is, but...
No, I respect that. If you would take her original outfit and instead of just, you know, going down as far as they did in the 90s, if you just streamline it a bit and give her a weapon that doesn't look like a cattle prod, she could probably be, at least visually, very comparable to most other heroes in DC.
But they haven't given her that platform.
Not so far. And that's not to say that she never will, but this miniseries definitely is not it.
No.
But today is not that day.
Yeah.
This podcast is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
So, I'm sure there are good stories out there involving all these characters. This is not one of them. I'm sorry.
No.
Hit and miss, you know, part of life.
Yeah. Every once in a while we're going to find something that all of us can agree on. It's not it. and this is that. So, next week we can finally do a storyline we have been kicking about for a while. As of this week, the final issue of Once and Future comes out.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
So we can
I'm
do
excited.
the Boom Studios miniseries about the Arthurian legend told in a very different format.
I love Arthurian legend.
Yeah, I think you guys will be surprised by it, but we'll see what kind of surprise it is. So, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope it doesn't sound like entirely like a gripe fest. We tried. We really did.
Just when it's like it.
Yeah, it just wasn't there for us this time around. But we'll see what happens next week when we do Boom Studios Once and Future. Thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed everything. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
And I am Jesse.
The Cosmic Library is now closed.